Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I've worked with Colourshift paints a couple of times, first making pearlescent effect on my Drop Fleet Commander PHR ships, and just recently I did a quick paint job of this deep sea big mouth that I sculpted for my June big mouth club release, which you can find the link to that down below in the description. I wanted to share with you a few things that I learned while using them. Number 1. Keep the scheme simple. Colourshift paints are weird and complex to look at, so make sure you don't overcomplicate the model. I don't recommend using multiple Colourshift paints on the model unless you're doing something like a zenithal with 2 different colours from different angles. Try and keep the rest of the model simple too if you ask me. It'll make Colourshift an easy focal point to the model and stop the model from looking too busy. 2. Airbrush is best, but brush works okay too. So I've used both Turbo Dork and Greenstuff World Colourshift paints, and I find them both really similar. They have a relatively gel-like consistency, but are pretty weak and feel like they have a low pigmentation and don't cover instantly well, and they're not super smooth. And that's one of the reasons why the airbrush is so good, because you can really easily lay down a few coats to get the coverage that you want. When you're using a brush, you have to be a bit more patient. And I feel it's a lot similar to glazing the fluorescents in the last video, where you just have to take it slowly and build up the coats over time. For this squig, I mostly relied on an airbrush coat, but I did end up using the brush for a couple of highlights. Number 3, shade it down. This might be the controversial bit, but a big problem with Colourshift paints, in my opinion at least, is that they need a lot of coats to build it up, and then when you do that, they're really just a big flat area of shiny metallic looking areas, which obviously metallic paints, they sort of create their own highlights to an extent, but it can still lack definition. For when I was doing my PHR ships, that's what I wanted, but when I did this big mouth, I wanted to help sort of define the forms of the muscles and the legs and stuff. So in that case, I used some Nuln oil around the lowlights to really just help them pop and help redefine those forms. I think it's really important, but now we need to talk about the next point. 4. Keep it shiny. The matte nature of the Nuln oil completely ruined the Colourshift paints when I put it on. It's really hard for it to show up properly on camera, but essentially all the shine was lost and it ended up just looking like a chromatic black. I managed to bring it back by doing 2 things. One was to highlight the raised areas with the Colourshift paints again, and the other was to give it a coat of satin varnish around the recesses that was still matted out by the Nuln oil. I can't stress enough how important it is for the model to keep that shiny coating if you want your Colourshift paint pigments to really show and to give you that sort of colour shift and shine look that we want when we're using them. Personally, from what I can see, I think the best areas on the model are still those that are like a bit glossy, but the satin areas are pretty good as well, and it's pretty suitable for recesses and areas that you don't want to catch the light too much. And that concludes my 4 quick tips for using Colourshift paints. I'm definitely going to be playing around with these more in the future. I think there's a lot more that we can learn about them, and I want to try out other techniques, some washes like Nuln oil that aren't naturally matte. I could spring for the glossy Nuln oil, I guess, but maybe try oil washing or an oil pin wash, because I think that would really help redefine those areas and blocks on the model. When you're using complex models, like I'm thinking about doing Mechanicus or something with these, so I think that would be a place where I could definitely try oil pin washing to define volumes and areas in the model. So yeah, consider sticking around, subscribe and like the video, and you too can have the vague hope that one day I will have another video talking more about Colourshift paints. Alright, thanks guys, and I'll see you all next time.